I got a job with Tony Martin on Get This as the assistant producer, and that was brilliant. That was probably my most enjoyable year of radio, I think, working on that show and also doing, producing, audio producing, and yeah, that was a wild ride. Talk about meeting famous people. I was like, oh, hi, that's Weird Al Yankovic, why not?
Well, a previous guest on this show, Stephen Walter Gerard, credits Tony Martin for getting him into yeah. So I do regret not getting the chance to listen to Get This, because that was
on. You still can. It's still available on podcast.
Okay. I've got no excuse then. But it went to air back when I was overseas, and
of course,
I just remember. Yeah. I remember when it got axed, there was a big protest outside the radio station. I saw photographs, and someone had a big sign saying "Release the bees." I was like,
what does that mean?
Oh, this is a unique crowd. He's obviously made a very, very special thing.
It was like a cult in some ways. It was. There were in-jokes that would keep coming back over and over. Warwick Capper, Richard Marsland, of course, was working on it. And he's somebody who, again, if you're in radio, you might know of Richard. He was an absolute gem of a human being, no longer with us. But, there was this whole Warwick Capper thing that he did where he made you can actually download it. I think I've got it on my phone, where you can download all these grabs of Warwick Capper saying things, and he turned it into a whole thing. So
a soundboard?
Yeah, a soundboard, yeah. Oh, here we go. I have got it. It's called the Marsland 5000. Yeah. Let me see what it plays.
All right, that's good stuff.
So these were always peppered through the show, and there was a whole universe that was created, and very dedicated listeners. And it was a real shame when it was axed. But, maybe sometimes it's good to go out on top.
It never made sense to me why some comedy shows got flicked, because they had too dedicated an audience. It was just, come on, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. I reckon if it had had another year, it would have probably even grown bigger and broader, because it was really at its height, I feel, when it was axed. And I even created, this is one of my favourite things too, I created a sketch and Tony Martin played it in the show.
All right.
Yeah,
what was it about?
Crowning highlight. It was actually Richard Marsland talking to Matthew McConaughey.
Okay.
It was Matthew McConaughey taken from, this is something that happened all the time too in the show, that these sketches would be made with grabs of someone, hence the Marsland 5000 app you can get, and then insert your conversation. So it was like a fake conversation.
Yeah.
It's still around somewhere. I haven't got a copy of it, but it's definitely in the podcasts and stuff. And I'm sure someone listening to this will be like, oh, I've got it.
I've certainly got some homework to do.
You do.
Yeah. So what happened after to Get This for you?
I was just really doing audio producing, but I'd started to ramp up my voiceover work too. So I was working on a couple of cartoons, but part of the reason I left though was, I mentioned Richard Marsland before. So Richard was a comedian. He was a radio nerd from way back. He was so good at radio, so good, one of the best. He was really interested in the craft, like you say about the comedy shows. He had a really good ear for things. He was really dedicated, but if you do listen to the Get This podcast, Richard features heavily, and you can tell how wonderful he was. I used to always say to him, and he always apologised, and I'd say, Richard, you might only have a limited number of sorries. Don't use them all up on this. You don't need to be sorry. It's okay. He ended up working on The Breakfast Show with Miff Warhurst and
Peter Hellier
that next year. And then at the end of that year, he died. He passed away, and it was his choice. So it was gut-wrenching. Absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, who knows what goes through someone's mind when that happens, and you can try and figure it out forever and a day, and even all these years later, it still gives me goosebumps to think about it. But it really did change something in my mind about working there. I just couldn't, it was kind of the catalyst. I mean, it wasn't the reason, but it was the catalyst. And I was like, I just don't feel like I can be here anymore.
Yeah.
With him not here. And I know that sounds really stupid because we weren't that close, really. We worked together and we were mates, but we weren't close mates. But I absolutely adored him, and he was always so supportive and wonderful.
He was a very large figure in the Pete and Miff show, and it kind of, I mean, they finished the very last thing of their last show was replaying one of his sketches. So there was that show never really recovered from that either.
No. Yeah, and again, to this day, everyone who knew him still has a very big Richard-sized part of their heart, because he really was one in a million.
For more of this chat with voice artist Cecelia Ramsdale, you can check out the podcast Off Mic, Life After Radio, wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube.